Euro 2024 is just around the corner, so you know what that means. A giant preview. I'm not going to waste any of your time. Let's go straight to the first group. Group A has Germany, Scotland, Hungary, and Switzerland. Germany are three-time winners. The last time they won was in 1996, and last time out in Euro 2020, they crashed out in the last 16. At that time, Joachim Löw was still the manager. Things have definitely changed since, because the new manager is now Julian Nagelsmann. So far, he's done a fantastic job at quickly transitioning this German team to his philosophy. While a very, very small sample size, after struggling in his first 4 games, Germany bounced back with 2 emphatic victories against both France and the Netherlands. He's agreed to stay until 2026, so while Germany do host this tournament, there's at least a little less pressure on them. Just a little. When it comes to the team, you have a solid center-back partnership of probably Jonathan Tah and Antonio Rudiger. Rudiger has a ton of experience and is Germany's best option, while Tah has only just recently been trusted to hold the line. As a regular starter for Leverkusen, his backline only conceded 24 times, the best in the Bundesliga this season. And in between the sticks, might not be Manuel Neuer this time. I'm not really too sure, but it seems like Marc-Andre ter Stegen has been the one that Germany has been putting their trust in lately. Onto the midfield, and a big comeback is Toni Kroos. He is going to be crucial to this team's success. World class in his passing range and accuracy, and will give Germany much more composure with his ability to dictate play. He also hasn't lost his touch either. In fact, he had a man of the match performance against France in the friendly. To be fair, it is still friendly, but still promising things. Other midfielders include Ilkay Gundogan. He's a great playmaker and his movement allows space to open for others. Robert Andrich can give you that physicality and work rate in such a taxing tournament like this. And while Thomas Muller is older now, he can still at least give you something off the bench. Onto the attack, there's quite a few interesting options. We'll start with the fact that Germany have a number 9 that they actually should play this time, Niklas Füllkrug. 4 goals in his last 6 caps for the national team. He's a great poacher and has even better aerial presence. He also scored 4 goals in his last 6 caps for Germany. Then you have forward Kai Havertz, who has actually had a really good season club-wise. Probably experienced his best year yet, 13 goals, 7 assists for Arsenal. Those 2 are great options, but now we gotta talk about the even more exciting prospects. All eyes have to be on attacking midfielder Florian Wirtz. This could be an explosive tournament for him. 11 goals and 11 assists for Leverkusen this season, and overall, he's just been very fun to watch. And then there's Jamal Musiala, another promising attacking midfielder. Germany is stacked here. Musiala also has experience from the last World Cup where he showed us glimpses of what he could do, so I expect even more of that in the Euros this time around. Next, Scotland. They have only made 3 appearances and have never actually made it past the group stages. That also counts the last Euros, where they didn't win a single game. In fact, they haven't won a game in the Euros since 1996. Their manager is Steve Clarke. He's been around since 2019 and is the longest serving manager for Scotland since Craig Brown. Under Clarke, the Scottish returned to the Euros in 2020 for the first time in 24 years. Scotland's biggest strength is their midfield. There's midfielder John McGinn, who is key to helping Aston Villa confirm a spot in the Champions League next season. Midfielder Scott McTominay turned into a goal-scoring machine in the qualifiers. 7 goals in 10 caps, absolutely exploding. Many of these goals were also very important in Scotland's qualification campaign. And I think one to really watch out for, though, is midfielder Billy Gilmour. Over the last year, he has significantly improved for both club and country, which really means a lot when you remember he actually had a man of the match performance against England in the last Euros. The striker position still has quite a couple questions. Forward Lyndon Dykes was trusted in the qualifiers. He could be that guy, but you can't ignore Lawrence Shankland, better known as Lawrence London.
Runneth thy pocket.
He scored 24 goals in each of the last 2 Scottish Premier League seasons. Defense-wise, it could be a bit of a concern for Scotland. They're missing their first choice right back Aaron Hickey and also another right back in Nathan Patterson. It's not looking great. Goalkeeper could be a concern too, because the most experienced one is Angus Gunn, with 9 caps. But at least there's still a leader like left back Andrew Robertson. If Scotland's defense is to even be slightly good, it's all because of him. In contrast to Euro 2020, there's a lot more experience this time, and some more leadership. And if Scotland can get past that hump of getting their first ever victory, who knows how far they could go. By the way, it may not seem like it at all, but I'm actually half Scottish. I won't elaborate. Hungary is also in this group, as we've mentioned before. They've had 4 appearances in the Euros, with their best finish being 3rd in 1964. Their last appearance was back in Euro 2020 when they nearly made it out of the group of death. Manager Marco Rossi has been guiding his team since 2018. He helped Hungary qualify for Euro 2020 and has helped his team put up some really impressive performances over the years. Draws with Germany and France in Euro 2020, and then in 2022 there was the 4-0 win against England and the 1-0 win against Germany. Defense is going to be key, and Hungary's is pretty solid and full of a ton of experience. Goalkeeper Peter Gulácsi didn't play much for Leipzig, but is still a reliable keeper. Adam Lang and Attila Szalai will be pivotal in Hungary's 3 center-back system, and arguably their best center-back, Willy Orban, is returning from injury. Hungary have a pretty solid midfield, one capable of grit and grind that can get through to the next round. Loic Nego can provide creativity, while Adam Nagy can cover the defensive work. Another promising avenue for creativity could come from 20-year-old Milos Kerkez. The Bournemouth defender can burst up the flank as a wingback and connect with the forwards. In terms of the attack, you got options like Roland Salai and Barnabas Varga. Barnabas in particular has 4 goals and 9 caps. He also scored 20 goals this season in the Hungarian league. However, the main guy has to be the ever so crucial Dominik Szoboszlai. At just 23 years old, he is the best Hungarian player in quite some time. Szoboszlai has excellent technique, which he uses to both score and provide for his teammates. And don't forget about those free kicks either. After being punished with the group of death, this time around Hungary get a lot more lucky with their group draw. And I could even label these guys as a solid dark horse pick. But let's not get too ahead of ourselves now. They still have to capitalize on the moment first. Lastly, there's Switzerland. They've had 5 appearances in this tournament, and their best result came in the last Euros, actually, when they reached the quarterfinals. Manager Murat Yakin has been around since 2021. He led Switzerland to the last 16 in World Cup 2022 and helped the Swiss qualify for Euro 2024. With defense, you have Ricardo Rodriguez, Manuel Akanji, and Fabian Schär, which is a pretty formidable and experienced backline. And don't forget also, they have the exceptional Jan Sommer, who always seems to show up when it comes to an international tournament. In midfield, you got tons of options. Denis Zakaria has had quite the bumpy road in his development years, but his time at Monaco has allowed him to revive his career and play the way he intended. Denis can provide for you on both sides of the ball. He's aggressive on defense, and you can see that in how he was one of the best interceptors of the ball this season. And also, he's pretty good at long shots as well. Remo Freuler is a great deep-lying playmaker, and maybe Michael Abischer could partner with him. The two both played for Bologna, who just qualified for the Champions League. The main guy in the midfield, though, has to be Granit Xhaka. He is the engine of Switzerland. Wherever the team goes, it's all being facilitated by him. Xhaka is dangerous with every touch he gets, and he's fantastic at providing passes to the attacking third. And he also has an eye for goal. Speaking of goals, I can't really say the attack is that spectacular. Xherdan Shaqiri at 32 years old is still one of the main contributors, and in World Cup 2022, he was awful. Zeki Amdouni is next in line, but I'm not entirely sure about him either. Oh, but Maxwell, what about Noah Okafor? Don't make me laugh. Also, I forgot to mention this in the script, but there was Briel Mbolo, but he's been having injury problems throughout the entire season. When you look at Group A overall, Germany are easily the favorites, and I would say they're one of the favorites to win the tournament just because they're hosts, and also Julian Nagelsmann is in charge. Outside of that, though, it's really anyone's game for the runners-up in 3rd place position. Scotland, Hungary, and Switzerland all are around that same level. Group B, we have Spain, Croatia, Italy, and Albania. Spain are 3-time winners, with their last coming back in 2012. Their last finish, however, saw them reach the semis in 2020. Their manager now is Luis de la Fuente. Prior to getting the job after World Cup 2022, he was working with the youth team since 2013. Under his philosophy, he's ditched the long and sterilizing possession-based football that has held Spain back for a decade now. The team still dominates possession, but de la Fuente has revolutionized the way the Spaniards attack now. Because now, wingers are actually encouraged to beat their man and cross the ball into a more traditional center forward. Players like Nico Williams, Mikel Oyarzabal, and even Lamine Yamal have all been benefiting from this revolutionized style. Lamine, by the way, is 16 years old, and he's definitely not your ordinary teenager. He has all the attributes to beat his man: anticipation, technicality, and explosiveness. Despite the more effective attack in terms of the tactics themselves, in terms of the actual options, still a little questionable. Alvaro Morata has been that main guy for Spain for quite some time. I don't really expect that to change, even though he's really not that good. But there's also Joselu. Last year, he scored 5 goals and 9 caps, and he's exactly that traditional center forward De La Fuente needs. Midfield is a very strong suit for the Spaniards. Fabian Ruiz and Dani Olmo will provide you that creativity, and Rodri is easily the best defensive midfielder in the world currently. Incredible tackling success rate, unbeatable in the air, and his ball ball-winning skills are the best out there. He's also a great playmaker in his own right. Rodri can work as an outlet with his ball-holding abilities and vision. He can score some insanely clutch goals. Now, this is what he can do for Manchester City. He's still effective for Spain, but he hasn't really shown all that for the Spanish national team. But if he can in this tournament, there's no doubt that Spain's going far. Oh, there's also Pedri, if his body doesn't fall apart by the time he gets off the plane. Finally, there's defense. And the funny thing about Spain's center-back partnership is that they're not even Spanish. They're French. Aymeric Laporte and Robin Le Normand have seemed to be the pair that De La Fuente trusts the most. The one concern is that Laporte plays his football in Saudi Arabia, but honestly, I'm not really sure that's going to be that big of a deal. And in terms of fullbacks, Spain has a ton to work with. Alex Grimaldo, Dani Carvajal, Pedro Porro, Jesus Nava, hell, even Marc Cucurella. And in between the sticks will more than likely be Unai Simon. I have never rated this guy in my entire life. He is, though, coming off the best season of his career at Bilbao, so maybe things change this time around. Croatia. They've had 6 appearances, with their best finish coming in the quarterfinals in 1996. Their last finish, however, they crashed out in the last 16. Manager Zlatko Dalic has created miracles with this golden generation. He's been guiding Croatia since 2017, and in that time, they've had 1 runners-up finish in World Cup 2018 and a 3rd place finish in World Cup 2022. However, in Croatia's only Euro under this guy, they only reached the last 16. The Croatians hope to change their fortunes this time around, but it could be pretty tough with a lot of these players aging. Speaking of players, Dominik Livakovic could be a massive help. He was arguably the best keeper in World Cup 2022. Actually, for me, he was the best keeper. He should have won Golden Glove. Anyways, though, he's still just as reliable. Not to mention, if Croatia go to penalties, I mean, it's guaranteed that they'll win it with Livakovic. In front of him is a pretty solid core of defenders. Josko Gavardio and Josip Sutalo will probably be the main center-back partnership. Josko was the best defender in the World Cup of 2022, and while he had a slow start to life at Man City, he's back to peak form at the best time. Then there's fullback Josip Juranovic. He'll provide the Croatians another avenue to attack through. Midfield is, as usual, extremely stacked. Mateo Kovacic can get himself out of a press and is one of the most accurate passers of the ball. Mario Pasalic had a really good season for Atalanta. He could grab you a goal or two. Marcelo Brozovic is your main anchor for this team, and he is what allows the other midfielders to roam more. And then there's Luka Modric, as phenomenal as ever. No one is more of a master at build-up play than the 38-year-old, who will probably play his last international games in Germany. Goal scoring hasn't necessarily been a huge concern for the Croatians, because they could just hold out for 120 minutes and produce some dark magic, but the main scorer is Andre Kramaric. Last year, he scored 5 goals in 8 caps. Ivan Perisic is coming back from an ACL injury, but at 35 years old, I'm not really sure if he's really going to return to his peak form. Italy are your reigning champions. They've actually won 2 times now, but they are not returning with the same manager, however. He decided to off to Saudi Arabia. This time around, the manager is Luciano Spalletti. Just a season ago, he led Napoli to their first Serie A title since 1990. And he did it with Napoli playing by far the most entertaining football of any other team in Europe. Spalletti, though, doesn't really have a system. At least that's his words. His philosophy is based on seeing the space the opposition leaves and knowing when to strike, which you can definitely see in how fluid Napoli's team was. Now leading Italy, however, he hopes to retain the title for the Azzurri with his expertise. The team itself returns pretty strong. You have Gianluigi Donnarumma, who was absolutely unstoppable in Euro 2020. He fell off a bit after his move to PSG, but it seems like Donnarumma has found his form again. And he'll be supported by a completely different core of defenders than the one from the previous tournament. You got Francesco Racismo Acerbi, Alessandro Bastoni, Gianluca Mancini, and Matteo Darmian. Acerbi, Bastoni, and Darmian all worked together at Inter and conceded the least amount of goals in the league this season, while Mancini has impressed a ton for Roma. And while I don't think he'll play that much, I think Scalvini from Atalanta is also a shout, considering how good he was in the final of the Europa League. Also, Spalletti once played a guy by the name of Alessandro Buongiorno. My guy's name is literally Alessandro Good Morning. Federico Di Marco is another player from Inter in this squad. He's a wingback that can provide the Italians some spice down the flanks. Whether or not he'll replicate that same insane form that Spinazzola had in the last Euros, we'll see. In the midfield, it would have been nice to see someone like defensive midfielder Sandro Tonali, but unfortunately, The footballing world does not believe in freedom of gambling. That said though, there are two players that should be nailed down in this midfield. Nicola Barella played a big part in Italy's Euro 2020 run through his creativity and work rates, and Jorginho is like the metronome of the whole team. He's an expert in dictating play. His particular role at Arsenal over the last 2 years has also shown that he can close a game for a team. Keep an eye on Davide Fratesi as well off the bench. He provided 6 goals and 2 assists for, you guessed it, Inter. Attack isn't necessarily the strongest, but honestly, I think it's a little bit better than the last Euros. I've been following Riccardo Orsolini for quite some time now, so it's nice to see the guy make it into the Italian team. But anyways, Orsolini plays on the wing, and he was key to Bologna's Champions League qualification. Just like another player we'll talk about in a second, he's fast and great at beating his man. And he also has a tendency to cut inside, just like Federico Chiesa. Federico Chiesa was the difference maker for Italy in the knockouts of Euro 2020. It was like anytime he had the ball, his mad dashes toward the goal or a defender would result in something. Injuries have been really tough on this guy though, and his development has suffered because of it. However, he's managed to bounce back and score 8 goals for Juventus. Now it's just a matter of ending the near 4-year goal drought for Italy. And if he can do that, Italy has a weapon of mass destruction on their hands. In terms of finishers, Spalletti has been putting his trust in Giacomo Raspadori. It makes sense considering the manager worked with the 24-year-old at Napoli, but if he doesn't work out, there's also Matteo Retegui. He has 4 goals and 6 caps, and that was all from last year. Lastly, we have Albania. Poor Albania. This is their first appearance since 2016 where they didn't make it out of the groups. Their manager is Silvinho, a former Arsenal player actually. He came in the beginning of 2023 and helped Albania win their qualification group to confirm a ticket to Germany. For this feat, Silvinho was actually given the golden decoration of the eagle by the Albanian Prime Minister, and then he was actually granted Albanian citizenship. Albania played a very aggressive attacking style under Silvinho, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be all thrown out the window for the Euros. I mean, they can't play that against Spain, Croatia, and Italy. Because in order to survive this group, Albania's defense has to be as formidable as physically possible. And there's already an issue. The goalkeeper situation. Their number 1, Etrit Berisha, is currently injured, but could be okay by the beginning of the tournament. That said, he hasn't played since March, so that could affect his performances. Albania does have a decent backup in Tomas Strakosha, but he's only played 2 games for Brentford this season. Thankfully, there's no issues in the backline. The center-back pairing will more than likely be Armand Ayeti and Beret Dibsiti, while the fullbacks will be Mario Mitai and El Sayed Hisai. Now, I know you shouldn't put too much emphasis on the qualifier results, but it is promising that this backline did play throughout all of the qualifiers and only conceded 4 times. In the midfield, you got a double pivot of Yabir Ramadani of Lecce and yet another Inter player in Christian Aslani. 22-year-old Aslani in particular has great anticipation and is also able to play any midfield role. In terms of attacking threats, Nadim Barami is a pretty decent creative outlet. Goal scorers though, it's a little bit harder to nail down. Soko Sikaleshi usually starts up top, but there's also Ernest Musi of Besiktas. And then there's a more higher profile player like Armando Broja of Fulham. Albania's biggest strength is that there's no individuals, just a team. So if they stick to their shared values and shut down their opponents, there's a chance. But it's still very slim. For Group B, I don't know who's really going to win this one. It could be Italy, it could be Spain, or even Croatia. You can never count them out. But more than likely, with Spain and Italy being big favorites for this tournament, it'll be one of them. Albania, on the other hand, I mean, it ain't looking good. On to Group C, we have Slovenia, Denmark, Serbia, and England. Slovenia make their first appearance since Euro 2000, where they crashed out and went winless. They've been managed by Matjas Kek since 2018, and since being manager, he led Slovenia to their first international tournament since 2010. To put that into perspective, this is 31-year-old Jan Oblak's first international tournament. 31. He's no longer the irreplaceable keeper he was for Atleti, but a keeper of his quality is still invaluable to Slovenia. Defense is going to be especially important for the supposed weakest link. The Slovenians will have a center-back partnership of Jaka Bijol and Miha Blasic. Keep an eye though on left wing-back Erik Jansa. He broke out into the national team last year and has been pretty impressive. Jansa has proven to be a goal scorer with 2 goals in his first 8 caps for this team, not to mention his 13 assists in 159 games for Polish club Górnik. Midfield is pretty set in stone. There's not too many options. Adam Nezda Sarin is the creative outlet, while Timmy Max Elsnik does the dirty work. Then up top, Slovenia has 2 goal scorers. Andras Borar has scored 8 goals in a little over 1,000 minutes for Panathinaikos this season, and the main stud, Benjamin Šeško. He's 6'5", so he has incredible aerial dominance and still manages to be really fast. He can easily be Slovenia's target man, but also he can play deeper and not have a problem with it whatsoever. Last year he moved to Leipzig, and while things started out slow, he ended the season scoring in 7 consecutive games. That is easily the best thing that Slovenians want to hear going into this summer. And for Slovenia in particular, Šeško had 5 goals and 2 assists in qualifiers. Denmark won this tournament back in 1992. Their last finish wasn't too far off as they reached the semis as one of the most inspirational teams in Euro 2020. Manager Kasper Hjulmand has been around since 2020 and has led Denmark to 2 tournaments. We already mentioned the inspiring Euros run, but the more recent performance saw the Danes crash out in World Cup 2022, which could be a sign that Father Time is not exactly Denmark's friend anymore. Goalkeeper Kasper Schmeichel, for example, is no longer the unstoppable beast he was. He is 37 after all, but he is still serviceable and is still better than half the keepers in this tournament. But then we get to problem 2. Simon Kjær. The 35-year-old captain is still invaluable when it comes to leadership and experience, but he's definitely not as good as he was 2 years ago, and an ACL injury has only made him worse. That said, there's still Joachim Andersen and Andreas Christensen. Andersen always seems to put up some really solid performances for both club and country. Honestly, I would say he's one of the more underrated attack-minded center backs. Christensen, about the same there. He can also play defensive midfielder if needed, not to mention he can score a goal or 2 for you. Speaking of goals, fullback Joachim Mæhle could be a massive threat on the flank. In Euro 2020 specifically, he was near unstoppable. Whether we see the same in this tournament, we'll just have to see. If I had to guess, the midfield will probably consist of mainly Christian Eriksen, Pierre-Emil Højbjerg, and Thomas Delaney. It's nice to see Eriksen return to the Euros after his collapse last time out. He may not be as good as he once was, but Eriksen can definitely still give you some creativity. Pierre-Emil Højbjerg, however, has completely fallen off a cliff. If he doesn't work out, Denmark could still experiment with someone like Christian Norgard. If he gets called up, that is. In attack, there's 2 very interesting forwards. Jonas Wind was a surprise call-up for the last Euros, but this time around, he was to be expected. Because Wind in his first 9 league games in the Bundesliga scored 8 times. He did slow down significantly, but knowing he can get red hot like that all of a sudden, that's perfect for a tournament. While he may still be extremely raw, he's shown a ton of courage over the last 12 months. The 21-year-old started horribly for United, but ended the season with 10 goals and 2 assists. And more importantly for Denmark, he bagged 7 in qualifiers. Serbia, this is actually their first appearance in the Euros as just Serbia. Because before then, as Yugoslavia, they were runners-up twice in 1960 and 1976, and as Serbia and Montenegro, they reached the quarterfinals in 2000. Their manager is J-League legend Dragan Stojkovic. Since 2021, he's now helped Serbia qualify for 2 straight international tournaments. That's the first time that's ever happened for them. Goalkeeper Vanja Milinkovic-Savic will more than likely be in between the sticks for this team. He just had one of his better seasons for Torino, so hopefully that form carries on for Serbians. Serbia's defense will more than likely be a back 3 of Nemanja Gudelj, Nikola Milinkovic, and Strahinja Pavlovic. They're all very tall and strong, which could help a lot against players like Benjamin Šeško and even Harry Kane. Pavlovic I'd watch out for in particular though, mainly because the 23-year-old impressed a lot in the last World Cup. Midfield has a ton of options for Serbia. You got well-rounded options like Nemanja Maksimovic and Sasha Lukic. If you need a more defensive midfielder, you have Ivan Ilic. The main staples, however, have to be Sergej Milinkovic-Savic and Dusan Tadic. Tadic is Serbia's main creative outlet, and Milinkovic-Savic is a box-to-box midfielder with excellent technical ability. Up front to score the goals, you have the likes of Luka Jovic and Dusan Vlahovic, but the most favorable option is once more going to be Alexander Mitrovic. Even though he's playing in Saudi Arabia right now, he hasn't shown any signs of stopping. He's had 27 goals in the Saudi League this season. He's only just behind Ronaldo in the top scorers. And for Serbia, he scored 5 goals in 8 games last season. Serbia once again have a pretty solid team. The only problem is they don't really know how to perform when the lights are bright. So, we'll just have to see if that changes. Lastly, in Group C, we have England, and they were the closest to ever winning the Euros back in Euro 2020, when they lost on a penalty shootout in the finals. Their manager has been Gareth Southgate since 2016, but yeah, that's right, it's been 8 years. And England still haven't won anything with this generation. The main problem is that this England squad has so many tools at its disposal, but when it comes to tournaments, Southgate doesn't really use any. For years, he's been criticized as very pragmatic and conservative, which sometimes has worked out for him, but others not so much. And as England are one of the favorites again, you wonder when the FA will lose its patience if Southgate fails again. Goalkeeper Jordan Pickford will once again be England's number 1. He's also coming off his best season to date with Everton. Thanks to his contributions, the Toffees finished with the 4th 4th best defense in the league. They may have finished 15th, but that's still really good. Speaking of defense, the most reliable center back pairing will more than likely be John Stones and Harry Maguire. Yes, I know Harry Maguire, but honestly, he's not too bad for England. Meanwhile, John Stones is one of the best ball-playing defenders in the world. For fullbacks, you got a lot of options, but the ones that will probably get playing time are the likes of Kyle Walker, Kieran Trippier, and Luke Shaw. Just because of his quickness and defensive abilities, Kyle Walker is invaluable for this English team. Because no matter how fast the attacker may be, how quick the counter is, Kyle Walker just somehow manages to stop it. Over to the midfield, Declan Rice will definitely be laying down the law as a defensive midfielder. Excellent ball winner, tackler, passing range, and he can even provide a goal or two. The one question though is, who will be the one to partner with him? Because there is no Calvin Phillips, he wasn't called up to the squad. So if I had to guess, it would either be Conor Gallagher or even 19-year-old Kobe Mino. Mino is a super interesting player because he can play both defensive midfielder and even attacking midfielder. And when it comes to the attacking aspect entirely of the midfield, it is 100% Jude Bellingham. Bellingham is easily one of the most talented players in the world currently. As a midfielder, he can pretty much do everything. But the one thing that stands out for me the most is that he's one of the smartest midfielders in this game, at just 20 years old. And unlike most youngsters, Bellingham had a ton of experience during World Cup 2022, so that's no worry whatsoever. And finally, there's the attack. Wingers undoubtedly have to be Bukayo Saka and Phil Foden. Saka had 16 goals and 9 assists for Arsenal this season, not to mention since the World Cup 2022, he's been phenomenal for England. Meanwhile, Phil Foden finally got his breakout season, 19 goals and 8 assists for Man City. He was a very big part of them winning the title once again. His England numbers aren't exactly that impressive, but Southgate has put a lot more trust in him, so maybe that pays off. Finally, striker. I mean, Ollie Watkins, Callum Wilson, shut the fuck up, it's Harry Kane. At 30 years old, Harry Kane had the best season of his entire career, and still didn't win a trophy somehow. More importantly for England, he's like Mr. Reliable. There is no one that comes even close to what Harry Kane can do for England. Group C should easily be topped by England, as they're one of the very strong favorites to win the whole thing. And really, just like Group A, it's going to be a dogfight for 2nd and 3rd place between Slovenia, Denmark, and Serbia. Group D, we have the group of death: Poland, the Netherlands, Austria, and France. Poland has been to 3 Euros, and their best finish came in 2016 when they reached the quarterfinals. Their last finish, however, in Euro 2020, though, saw them crash out in the groups. Poland's manager is Michael Probiec. He came in when Poland were in trouble and managed to guide the Polish to the Euros through the playoffs. Now, as you can see, Poland find themselves basically in hell. This group is filled with attacking talent. So, just like Albania, if the Poles want any chance of surviving, their defending has to be damn near perfect. And already, it ain't looking too hopeful. The main backline consists of decent options: Jan Bednarek, Pavel Davidovic, and an up-and-coming Jakub Kiwior. The problem, though, is that they're only decent. But perhaps there's a lifeline in goalkeeper Wojciech Szczesny, because the 34-year-old goalkeeper somehow, someway always comes up clutch when needed. For example, World Cup 2022, he was incredible against Argentina, 9 saves, and then he made 3 big saves against Wales to help Poland make it to the Euros. Over to the next third, Poland's midfield is facilitated by Jakub Piłczowski. He plays alongside one defensive-minded midfielder and one attack-minded midfielder. Bartosz Ślisz will be manning the defensive midfielder. He can be a big difference maker in disrupting opposing attacks. Meanwhile, Piotr Zielinski can provide a lot to the build-up of attacks. The wingbacks could also provide a surprise in attack as well. In particular, Nikola Zalewski, who at just 22 has impressed quite a bit. And on the right side, Poland have 2 good options in Matty Cash and Zemilov Rakowski. In attack, of course, Poland's main threat will be Robert Lewandowski. Thing is, he's never really shown out at tournaments, and I'm not really sure if that'll change as he is now 35. If he doesn't step up though, perhaps someone like Karol Suderski or Krzysztof Piatek could be the difference maker. Piatek in particular scored 14 goals for Besiktas this season. Now onto the Netherlands, and they won the whole show back in 1988. Unfortunately, things haven't really been the same as they crashed out in the last Euros in 2020 after not even making it in 2016. Their manager is Ronald Koeman. Koeman was actually manager in 2018, qualified for Euro 2020, but left before the tournament to coach Barcelona. He then returned for a second stint early last year after Louis van Gaal's 3rd tenure with the Dutch. And once again, he helped the Dutch qualify for the Euros, and this time, he's going to be staying for the Euros. The Dutch don't really have that much experience in the goalkeeper compartment. 21-year-old Bart Verbruggen has 5 caps, and 30-year-old Mark Flecken has 7. Both were pretty underwhelming for their clubs this season, but I guess the less underwhelming was Bart. Depending on if they go 2 center backs or 3 center backs, the Dutch should be prepared. Virgil van Dijk isn't at his peak, but still is the best option. Not to mention his leadership should be very invaluable. Matthijs de Ligt, since moving to Bayern, has improved significantly. And Man City's Nathan Ake is another great option. There's also Feyenoord's Lucharel Geertruida. The 23-year-old can play center back, fullback, and even defensive midfielder. And don't forget about utility man himself, Daley Blind. In the midfield, there's a lot of options. You got the Atalanta men, Toon Koopmeiners and Martin de Roon, or the PSV men of Jerdy Schulten and Joey Veerman. What Koeman is banking on, however, is the return of Frankie de Jong. He's currently injured, but should be cleared by the time the Euros start. Frankie describes himself as someone who likes to have the ball a lot. In fact, he's pretty much a natural on the ball, and that can provide the Dutch a sense of stability. In attack, there's a good amount of players that can get you a goal. Need a target man? There's Wout Weghorst. Need someone more skillful and quick? Memphis Depay. There is also Daniel Malin, who is also quick and has great technical ability. But two players that I feel could have really good tournaments if things go well for the Dutch are Cody Gakpo and Xavi Simons. Forward Gakpo had 8 goals and 5 assists for Liverpool, nothing too crazy there, but then you have to remember how he performed in the last World Cup. If he can bring that form into this Euros, it could be a good time. And then there's attacking midfielder Xavi Simons, 8 goals and 11 assists for Leipzig. His creative ability and explosiveness could be massive for the Dutch going forward. Austria has made it to the tournament 3 times, with their best finish coming in the most recent tournament, where they reached the last 16. Their manager has been Ralf Rangnick since 2022. And despite the fact that they drew into the group of death, there are some very exciting times for this Austrian national team going forward. And a lot of that comes down to the revolution that's occurring. Austria's always had very quality players, but their managers have instilled very outdated and conservative tactics. New manager Ralf Rangnick, however, is the antithesis of that. His style of play revolves around quick direct attacks and has an emphasis on gegenpressing. And since joining in 2022, he's built a strong relationship with players already familiar with his high risk, high reward philosophy. And this movement hasn't just produced extremely entertaining football, but it's also allowed Austria to put up fights against some of Europe's best teams. And this is all really promising stuff coming out of the Austrian camp. But I got some bad news, because 3 very important players will be missing due to injury. You got first choice keeper Alexander Schlager. Yeah, not really a good start. It doesn't stop there though. You have midfielder Xaver Schlager of Leipzig, and this one's gonna hurt the most. David Alaba. If I had to guess, Austria's next best option for keeper is Patrick Pence. He recently played against Slovakia and did manage a clean sheet, so at least there's that. In terms of defense, Alaba is a huge loss considering the world-class attributes he holds, but it's not necessarily the end of the world yet. You still have Philipp Lienhart, Max Wöber, and Kevin Danso. All have experience in the top 5 leagues. Fullback Stefan Posch has been really impressive too, as his aggressive off-the-ball style is exactly what Rangnick loves. Defensive midfielder Xaver Schlager being gone is definitely not ideal, but at least there's still Niklas Seyvald of Leipzig. Seyvald is an excellent tackler of the ball with endless energy, 2 attributes that work really well in Rangnick's system. And not to mention, there's still Konrad Laimer. The Bayern midfielder does an exceptional job at covering space. I don't think he's like N'Golo Conte like the Bundesliga website says, but he's still going to be extremely important for Austria's system. Another player that'll be crucial, Marcel Sabitzer. As a midfielder, he scored 5 times in 9 caps last year. Speaking of goals, most will be coming from attacking midfielder Christoph Baumgartner and forward Michael Gregoritsch. Baumgartner can both score and provide goals, and Gregoritsch just came off his best record for Austria, scoring 8 times in 5 caps last year. Because of all that I've just said, a lot of people are seeing Austria as a big dark horse pick, me included. But I'm being very careful here. Injuries are already not a great sign, and I'm not really that much of a firm believer in gegenpressing. But considering it is a smaller amount of games, maybe that does work out for Austria. How I see it, either Austria go really far, or they crash out in the groups. No in between. Lastly, there's France. 2-time champions, last game in 2000. They also came close to winning in 2016, but lost to Portugal. And speaking of the last 16, they crashed out in that phase in the last Euros. The manager for France has been Didier Deschamps since 2012. Easily the longest serving manager in this tournament. In that time, he's helped France reach 2 finals and also win the World Cup in 2018. Just from that info alone, he's been the most successful national team coach in the last 8 years. France looks a lot different from the last time they reached the finals of the Euros, and honestly, somehow they look even more talented. Goalkeeper Mike Maignan has been an excellent predecessor to Hugo Lloris, but unfortunately he recently got injured. Right now there's no telling if he'll be 100% by the time the tournament starts, but that's okay because there's also Bryce Samba, who just came off one of the best seasons of his entire career with Lens. Defense also suffered an injury in Lucas Hernandez, but thankfully there are more French footballers than iPhones in the world. Don't fact check that. The most trusted center back partnership for France going forward is probably Ibrahima Konate and William Saliba. Konate is unbelievably good. Saliba, on the other hand, I've not exactly been convinced with his international performances. If that doesn't happen though, there is also Upamecano. Pray that doesn't happen, Frenchies. Or there's also Benjamin Pavard, who can play right back and also center back now. In terms of fullbacks, Theo Hernandez has to be easily your number one choice at left back. I've already mentioned this before in numerous previews, Serie A, World Cup, whatnot. Easily one of the best offensive fullbacks in the world. Right back definitely has to be Jules Koundé, especially after he pocketed Mbappe in the Champions League. France has a lot of options in the midfield, but it has to go down to Antoine Griezmann, Aurélien Tchouameni, and Eduardo Camavinga. Tchouameni has done well coming back from injury and has played a huge role being the energetic destroyer for Real. Camavinga continues to break out of every shell with every game he plays, yet he just keeps getting better. Not to mention his versatility has become a strong part of his game. And Antoine Griezmann, for some reason, just doesn't get the plaudits he deserves. Since coming back to Atleti, he's looked like a newly refined version of his old self. And on top of that, I would say he is France's most important player behind Mbappe. This is mainly because Griezmann's on and off the ball skills are huge to how this team functions both in attack and defensive transition. Other options France could use include the likes of Warren Zaire-Emery if you're looking for more creativity, Youssouf Fofana for defensive qualities, oh, and also for some reason N'Golo Kanté was called up, but I think that's more for vibes. Attack, another strong suit for your favorites France. Marcus Thuram cooked at Inter with 13 goals and 7 assists. Bradley Barcola is turning into a really exciting prospect as well. And there's also Ousmane Dembele, I guess. But of course, the most important quality to the French attack is the dynamic duo of Olivier Giroud and Kylian Mbappe. With Giroud doing all the dirty work as a target man, it leaves Mbappe with so much room to roam into. It's why Mbappe has been so effective for France and already is 4th in the country's leading scorers, at 25. Group D should easily be topped by France, yet another really big favorite to win the whole thing. And from there, second could either be Austria or the Netherlands. It all just really depends on how Austria perform. And then there's Poland. I mean, like I said, I don't know, man. Over to Group E, we have Belgium, Slovakia, Romania, and Ukraine. Belgium have been in this tournament 6 times, and their best finish comes back in 2016 and 2020 when they reached the quarterfinals. During those times, their manager was Roberto Martinez, but no longer, because now their new manager is Domenico Tedesco since early 2023. Tedesco has done a solid job integrating the young talent with the older veterans. He loves his teams attacking as much as possible and emphasizes the importance of harnessing transitions. And with Belgium being pretty lucky with their group draw, expect to see some pretty exciting football right off the bat. In between the sticks will more than likely be Matt Sells of Nottingham Forest due to Thibaut Courtois' injury, and statistically speaking, he was one of the worst keepers in the Premier League this season. He had the second worst post-shot XG minus goals allowed, which basically means he struggled to save shots he should have saved. But at least the defense looks a little more stable. Unlike in World Cup 2022, when the average age of the center-back pairing was over 8,000 years old, Belgium now employs 400-year-old Jan Vertonghen alongside 26-year-old Wout Faes. The team also has 20-year-old Zeno de Bast, but it's probably in Tedesco's best interest to have someone with a lot of veteran experience. And if Belgium decide to go with 3 center-backs, there's also Arthur Thiet. As long as he's being played in the center, things will be alright. Issue is, he gets played out wide. Wingback Timothy Castagna can be used as a weapon going forward, but only in a 3 center-back system, because if this man's in a 4-man backline, he is absolutely atrocious at defending. Over to the midfield, things get a little more exciting. Defensive midfielder Amadou Onana is coming off a fantastic season with Everton, and he's also shown glimpses of what he can do for Belgium. There's not been too many talks about this guy going into the summer, so honestly, I kind of see him being a breakout star. Yuri Tielemans has significantly improved since moving to Aston Villa. He's got great vision and is able to hold onto the ball well, which is very beneficial to Belgium's attack. The only issue is, his defense is pretty lackluster. So either Onana has to work even harder, or Belgium can go with another option in Oral Mangala. Finally, we have the attack, which is very much a mix of the new and the old. Kevin De Bruyne and Romelu Lukaku have been stars for the past decade, and it never really mattered how good Lukaku was doing at a club level, he would always be bagging goals for Belgium. Only issue is, will he show up in this tournament? Last tournament, he was injured, so I'll give him a pass there, but he is getting older, not as much playing time, we'll have to see. And then there's Kevin De Bruyne, whose creativity and killer passes are absolutely invaluable to this team. But keep an eye also on the likes of Leandro Trossard, and especially Jeremy Doku. I really wouldn't be surprised if he's one of the top performers this season. That kind of skillful and explosive style he harnesses is perfect for a tournament like this. Did you know that there's a village called Horny Bar in Slovakia? Well, now you do. Slovakia was one of the most successful footballing nations when they were known as Czechoslovakia. 2 third-place finishes and then 1 title in 1976. Nowadays, they're not really seeing that same success, however. They've only had 2 appearances, but to be fair to them, they've now qualified for the last 3. Their best finish came in 2016 when they reached the last 16, but their most recent performance saw them crashing out of the groups. Their manager has been Francesco Calzona since 2022. He's also the current manager for Napoli. And thanks to him, Slovakia has qualified for their 3rd straight European Championship. In between the sticks, Martin Dubravka should be the starting keeper going forward. He's never been anything amazing, but has excellent footwork for a keeper. Dubravka also made 9 saves versus Portugal in a recent qualifier, but if by chance he isn't the number 1, there is also Marek Rodak. The center back pairing for Slovakia will more than likely be Milan Skriniar and Denis Vavro. Milan Skriniar is the best they have in defense, but he's far from his best right now, because since moving to PSG last year, he's kind of fallen off. And also due to an injury, Skriniar hasn't played for the Slovakian team since November of 2023. With fullbacks, Slovakia has 37-year-old Peter Pekarik and 26-year-old David Hanko. Hanko is really effective as an attack-minded fullback. For Feyenoord this season, he scored 5 goals and assisted 2. And for Slovakia, he scored 2 and assisted 3 in Euro qualifiers. Midfield is Slovakia's most solidified third. They're engineered by Napoli's Stanislav Lobotka in the center, and he's sandwiched in between Juraj Kučka and Ondrej Duda. Duda registered 4 goal contributions in qualifiers. Kučka, on the other hand, is 37 years old and also just got injured. So this could open an opportunity for someone like Laszlo Benz of Hamburg. For attack, Slovakia will more than likely have a front 3 of Robert Mak, Robert Bosnik, and Tomas Suslov. None of them are really that clinical for the national team though. However, Robert Bosnik is coming off 9 goals for Boavista in the Portuguese league. Romania has 5 appearances in the Euros, with their best finish coming in 2000 when they reached the quarterfinals. However, they make their first appearance since 2016. Their manager has been Eduard Iordanescu since 2022. Under his guidance, Romania actually qualified for Euro 2024 by winning their group over Switzerland. Starting keeper for Romania will more than likely be a man by the name of Horatiu Moldovan. The jokes write themselves. He just recently moved to Atleti in January, which is incredible when just 4 years ago, he couldn't even find a team to play for in Romania's 2nd division. Moldovan played a pretty crucial role in making clutch saves for the Romanians, so expect the same in the Euros. Romania's backline is pretty solid, which in a group like this could actually see the team thrive. Their main center back pairing is Andrei Burka and Radu Dragusin. Dragusin is easily the most exciting Romanian prospect in recent years, and his aerial dominance will come in handy in fending off the attackers in this group. In the midfield, you have 2 very hard-working players in Nicolae Stanciu and Alexandru Sicaldo. Sicaldo is a box-to-box midfielder with pretty good technique, and Stanciu is the main provider of creativity for Romania. His leadership also will make him a very important piece to this team. There's also Marius Martin, whose defensive work could provide an extra cover for the defense. Over to attack. There's a few decent options. Dennis Mann is the one to look out for on the wings. He scored a few times for the national team and is also coming off a pretty good season in Serie B. There's also Ianis Hagi, the son of Gheorghe, but quite like every son of a legend, it appears the apple does fall far from the tree. He has shown to be effective from time to time, so I see him more as the wild card for Romania. And up top, the manager has usually put his trust in Denis Alibek. And lastly, there's Ukraine. They've made it to every single Euro since 2012, which was the one they hosted. And their best finish came in the most recent one in 2020 when they reached the quarterfinals. Their manager, Serhii Rebrov, was appointed back in mid-2023. Under his tenure, Ukraine qualified through the playoff round after beating Iceland 2-1. It's finally nice to see this team represent their country for the first time since the invasion. Ukraine has experimented with keepers, but the number one has to be Andriy Lunin. If he can carry that Champions League knockouts form into the Euros, Ukraine could be in for a very special tournament. The backline has shown to be formidable as well, a good example being the 0-0 result against Italy. In that match, promising center back Ilya Zabarny showed off a really good performance, but he is only 21. Luckily though, he'll be partnered with a more experienced defender in Mykola Matvienko. But by far the most important defender for this nation going into this tournament, easily Vitaly Mykolenko. For Everton this year, his defensive expertise shined. Expect more this summer. Ukraine will also get some defensive protection from midfielder Taras Stepanenko. Another midfielder I expect to see is attacking midfielder Hirohi Sudakov. He's only 21 years old as well though, so it might be a good idea to have him play alongside a veteran of all trades, someone like Alexander Zinchenko. As opposed to fullback nowadays, Zinchenko's best position is the midfield. In fact, honestly, his best position's always been midfield. But in this role, he's the master of the half spaces, and he's a jack of all trades. He is going to be crucial for Ukraine once again. Another option Ukraine could use is attacking midfielder Ruslan Malinovsky. He's not exactly at his peak anymore, but he can show off some creativity off the bench. On to attack, there is a good amount of tools for Rebrov here. For wingers, you got rising stars like Viktor Tsigankov and Mikhailo Mudryk. Tsigankov just came off 8 goals and 7 assists in the league for Girona. Not to mention, he's put in some really good performances for Ukraine too. On the other hand, Mikhailo Mudryk didn't have that much success at a club level, but for Ukraine, he seems to be more comfortable in his own skin. And his confidence will definitely be up knowing he scored the goal that sent Ukraine to the Euros. There's also Andriy Yarmolenko, which I expect to come off the bench. He's got that veteran experience and can still score goals for them. And finally up top, it has to be Artem Dovbyk. The man scored 24 goals for Girona and won the Pichichi in his debut season for Girona. And just in case he goes dry, there's still super sub Roman Yaremchuk. For Group E, Belgium are easily the favorites to win this group. Outside of that, not too sure. Group F, honestly, I'm kind of excited for this one. Maybe just because they have Georgia. But they have Turkey, Georgia, Portugal, and Czechia. Turkey have made it to 4 Euros, with their best finish coming in 2008 when they had that Cinderella run all the way to the semis. Since then, they will be hyped up right before the tournament, be considered dark horses, and then crash out. This has now happened 2 straight times. Their manager has been Vincenzo Montella since September of 2023. He helped Turkey win their qualification group. Now, one thing we should also mention, by the way, is since the tournament is based in Germany, there is quite a large Turkish diaspora. So, you know, there could be a bit of home field advantage there. Trusted in goal will more than likely be Ergürkan Çakır, considering he's been used the most lately. Turkey also has a solid backup in Mert Günok. Now, for defense, it's honestly been a bit of a Greek tragedy for the Turks. Sorry. It was only a few years ago that I feel like Turkey's defense had a really bright future. Çağlar Söyüncü was an underrated defender at Leicester. You had Demirel over at Juve playing alongside the likes of Bonucci and Chiellini. And then there was Ozan Kabak, who was a future prospect. Nowadays though, Kabak is the only reliable center back. Outside of him, it's really hard to nail down who's the other center back because there's been so much experimentation. It could be Söyüncü, it could be Demirel since they have more experience, but Montella has also recently been giving a lot of opportunities to the likes of Samet Akaydın and Abdul Karim Bardakci. Turkey's midfield, though, is what the team's going to be banking on. There's a lot of quality here. Hakan Çalhanoğlu is still invaluable to this team. There's not many players like him who are just pure naturals in technique, vision, and passing. And also, don't forget, Çalhanoğlu is a set-piece specialist, which I feel kind of gets overlooked in these previews, but it can be really useful in tournaments. Playing in a double pivot with Hakan will probably be Salih Özkan. The Dortmund midfielder can do all the dirty work with his aggressive tendencies. Lined up above those two should probably be Orkun Kokcu, another creative asset. The 23-year-old had 8 goals and 7 assists for Benfica this season. Montella has also experimented with a certain wonder kid. Turks will probably call him Turkish Messi. Don't do that. That's a curse. But who am I talking about? Obviously, Arda Güler. Despite his injury-riddled season, some say he could break out this summer, but I'm not entirely sure about that. I'll say though, whatever the next tournament may be for him, that's when he'll break out. I don't think it's really his time yet. Speaking of promising 19-year-olds though, winger Kenan Yıldız has been used quite a bit since Montella came in. He could be another playmaker for this team. Kerem Aktürkoğlu is another interesting option on the flanks. He had 12 goals and 6 assists for Galatasaray this season. There's also the likes of Yusuf Yaziki and Yunus Akgün. And lastly up top, it's probably either Enes Ünal or Barış Yılmaz. Neither are really that great. Now, this is probably a decent group for Turkey to come out of. That's at least what we said last time out, and they failed miserably. So we'll just have to see this time. Georgia. Finally, we get to talk about a country making their debut in this tournament. This is actually their first ever appearance in an international tournament since their independence in 1991. Their manager has been Willy Sagnol since 2021. He helped Georgia qualify through the Euros from the playoff round. Now, many see Georgia as a pretty easy opponent, but trust me, they are anything but. Sagnol even mentioned that the team won't be, quote, going to Germany for shopping or tourism, but instead for ambition. Now, as we mentioned before, all odds are against Georgia in this group. But what you should probably know about their keeper, Georgi Mamardashvili, is that he was the best keeper in La Liga this season. In the league, he actually ranked first for post-shot XG minus goals allowed. And having a keeper of that quality can change everything for even the smallest of underdogs. I'm not saying they're dark horses, but they certainly have a better chance of advancing out of this group than most people think. Now, defense, on the other hand, relatively decent. Georgia likes to play a 3 center-back system consisting of Lasha Dovali, Solomon Kavakvelia, and captain Guram Kasia. Midfield is when things get very interesting because Georgia has a ton of young talents. Georgi Kokorashvili can give this team stability with his excellent composure, while Georgi Chekvadadze is the more attack-minded player who can provide you some goal-scoring opportunities. Another option could be Otar Kiteshvili. His versatility could come in handy. In attack, there are some pretty exciting pieces as well. Winger Zuriko Davidashvili scored 8 and assisted 8 in Ligue 2 this season. He's more of a super sub though. Then there's forward Georges Mikaldadze, who was even better in the French leagues. In fact, he scored 13 goals in Ligue 1. And he'll more than likely be up top with the star of the show, Khvicha Kvaratskhelia. Kvaradona, as they call them, is incredible on the ball. He has unbelievable technical ability with his close ball control. Kvaratskhelia also uses quick and sharp decision making to create chances for his team. If there is any player to keep an eye on in this Georgian team, it is Kvaradona. Portugal won this tournament back in 2016 in probably the most fraudulent way possible. But hey, you know, they still won. Their last finish, however, in Euro 2020 saw them crash out in the last 16. Their manager has been Roberto Martinez since the beginning of 2023. And once again, Martinez has failed up. I don't know how he does it. And let me get this quickly out of the way to make sure that no Portuguese people get fooled. Do not use the recent results as a model of success. Belgians have already learned the hard way this is not the case. But that said, Martinez does seem to have full control of the dressing room this time around. In fact, numerous players have actually sung their praises already, which is a good sign. Manning the goal will be 24-year-old Diogo Costa. Costa is pretty decent, but he is a little inconsistent. But as long as he isn't as shaky as he was in the World Cup, he should be alright. The ideal backline should consist of a Ruben Diaz and Pepe partnership, which is pretty wild considering Pepe is 41. Meanwhile, his partner in crime, Ruben Diaz, is one of the best defenders in the world right now. So you have a sense of safety with veteran leadership. I mean, that's an extremely formidable combo. Portugal has also been experimenting with another center-back in Gonçalo Inácio, and considering Portugal are dead-on favorites for this group, we could see a couple appearances from him. João Cancelo should be nailed down as one of Portugal's main fullbacks. He's one of the best attack-minded fullbacks in the world, so he'll give something to Portugal on the flanks. And on the other side of the flanks, there's a couple options. Nuno Mendes can give you that punch going forward. Diogo Dalot can very much do the same, but he's more important in defense. Martinez has done a lot of experimenting in the midfield, but there are two guys that have to be nailed down in the starting 11. Bruno Fernandes is that attacking cog. His vision and creativity will prove very useful. Not to mention, he's put in a lot of good performances for the national team. Then there's Joao Palhinha, a midfield general who's the heart of any team he plays for. Palhinha was especially impressive in the last Euro, so I expect very much the same in this tournament. There's also some options off the bench, including Otavio and Vitinha, who are both attack-minded midfielders. On the wings, you got Bernardo Silva and Rafael Leao. Bernardo Silva is one of the smartest footballers out there, and Rafael Leao's style kind of reminds me of something like Thierry Henry. Not to say that he is Thierry Henry, but definitely expect a show from him. Up top, there's a few options, like the newly rejuvenated Joao Felix, but I think Portugal's best option up top has to be Gonçalo Ramos, especially as his game fits the system a lot better. Ramos didn't have the best year for his new club PSG, but he is a proven goal scorer for Portugal. And I know people in the big 2024 are gonna ask, what about Ronaldo? Listen, we as a society need to let go of the past, okay? He is still very good, and he could excel off the bench, but he just doesn't fit the mold that Portugal are going for nowadays. They need someone more advanced, someone who can drop deep and support the midfield, and that is Gonçalo Ramos's game. That is not Ronaldo's game. We already mentioned the Slovakia part of Czechoslovakia's history. It's the same for Czechia. The big difference is that unlike Slovakia, Czechia has qualified for every tournament since 1996, and their best finish actually came in that tournament. They were runners-up, and their last finish was really good too. They surprised everyone by reaching the quarterfinals. Their manager is now Ivan Hasek, who was appointed in January after the other manager resigned. It's not really a great start considering Hasek has only managed 2 games for the Czechs, with the Euros just a month away. Starting in goal will either be Jindřich Stanek or Matej Kovar. Kovar was trusted in the Europa League by Leverkusen, and he was pretty good. Stanek, however, has played more times for the actual national team. So it really comes down to the manager. Does he want more international or club experience? In terms of the backline, the Czechs have solid center backs in David Zima and Euro 2020 hero Tomáš Holeš. Zima in particular has a tall stature, which could come in handy against some of his opponents. There's also Vladimír Soufal. Actually, no, he was banished from the national team for going to a nightclub. However, there is fullback David Jurasek from Hoffenheim. The 23-year-old loves delivering crosses from deep. Over in the midfield, Czechia has a double pivot of Michael Sadilek and Tomáš Souček. Souček is an energetic box-to-box midfielder with aerial superiority. In other words, he's very important to this team. For creativity in this third, you either have Lukas Provod or Antonin Barak. Provod was favored throughout the qualifiers, but I personally believe Barak is the better option. Finally, in attack, you have Mr. Clutch, Willany, Crimson Chin himself, Patrick Schick. Schick bagged himself 13 goals for Leverkusen this season, and a lot of them were crucial to maintaining Leverkusen's unbeaten run. The only issue is that Schick hasn't scored for the Czechs since 2022. But if he can bring back that form from Euro 2020, Czechia could be in for a very fun summer. No doubt Portugal are favorites to win this group, and also they've been favorites to win it all. But outside of them, it kind of just depends on Turkey, because if Turkey perform, this group could be really interesting with them and Czechia, and possibly Georgia. If they don't, it's probably between Czechia and Georgia. So that was the Euro preview. Just wanted to mention that I've recorded all of this, which is 29 pages, with the canker sore in my throat, so I'm living life. But anyways, who do you guys think will win the Euros? I'll do a prediction video probably like later next week or something like that. But yeah, comment your predictions. Who's gonna win it all? Who's gonna be the surprise performer? Who's gonna be the underwhelming performer? Who's gonna be top scorer? All that kind of stuff. Just leave it down in the description below. But of course, a massive shout out to all our members. Still trying to figure out a name for you guys. We'll figure it out soon. We got Janos Balash, Adnazir Makalankam, Alex Rod, Ulta, Billy Jack, Gwen Yung, Hysteria, Miguel Munoz, Return Fire, Rory Burns, Slider Kit, Snifrix, Taco Okafan, Tana Pamelia Celine Khan, The Cypriot 35, Tomakist, Victor, Saint Terrence, Capri Sunman, Kirbo, Kentra Agacha, Not Windows 95 Man, Chris Visconti, Dominic Griffin, Joe Aparicio, Kyler Krebs, Lucien Von Kreuz, Mohamed Al Tanib, Niche, Patrick Barley, Rashford God 5, Raspberry Ale, Rowan Cookie, Sylvia Citrus, subscribe to 10-Day Tim, and Unbroken Persona. If you'd like to join the new fourth wall, the new member page that I have, there will be a link up here in the annotations and in the description below. You can follow my Twitter if you want, follow my Instagram, follow my Twitch. I'll probably be doing some watch-alongs if my throat doesn't give up on me. But until then, I'll see you guys.